Okay, so we have finally hit the premiere of the highly anticipated HBO show, His Dark Materials. This is obviously based off the book series, His Dark Materials, which starts with the book The Northern Lights. These books are by Philip Pullman. I actually read these books over the summer to get excited for the show. I absolutely love them. But, just making clear here, I will not be giving any book spoilers in any of my reviews, and there is no discussion about the books in the comments below. No book spoilers anywhere on these reviews. These are only for the show. Please do that elsewhere. So this first episode is directed by a very famous director in Tom Hooper. He has done the Les Mis movie, The Danish Girl, and many more. So he does the first two episodes of this show. And we got a great cast here with Dafne Keen as Lyra. Familiar face from the movie Logan, where she was awesome in that. So she's a great pick here to play Lyra. You got A-lister James McAvoy as Lord Asriel and Ruth Wilson as Mrs. Coulter. So there was actually a movie made a couple years ago called The Golden Compass, which was based off the first book, The Northern Lights, where season 1 is probably mostly going to take place from the first book, as we see in episode 1. And that movie failed miserably, so it seems like this is just a story that works better as a show, but it's still very tough to pull off, especially when you have these characters of demons, these creatures that require a lot of CGI, which requires a lot of money. And what worried me about this show was how much money would they put into it? Knowing this is going to be airing on HBO, BBC, and New Line Cinema has helped produced it. There's a lot of hands here, but they're giving a lot of money to this because the CGI looks great and they're not cheap with it. They don't use it sparingly. You see a lot of the demons in this episode. And speaking of demons, what really worked well here for me was just in the intro, them having just a simple explanation in the beginning about the humans having in this world a connection to these demons that are human soul, and giving us a hint of a prophecy about a child here by witches, and mentioning this great flood that led to Lord Asriel bringing Lyra to Jordan College in the past. So you had to have something like that for a show like this, just to get people's heads into what they're getting into and kind of give an explanation of what is going on with these people, with these creatures. This show has obviously already been compared to Game of Thrones. It's going to have a lot of hype to it to live up to that kind of standard for HBO and something that's fantasy realm. But what you got to realize here is that these books aren't totally like Game of Thrones. I would say His Dark Materials is a nice mashup of Harry Potter and Game of Thrones had a baby. It's His Dark Materials. So you got to add the heart of Harry Potter and a little more family friendly here. So it's not going to be as like gruesome as Game of Thrones, but it will have that fantasy feel from Game of Thrones to it. Kind of certain characters you'll see and who you can trust and whatnot. So there's going to be people who loved Game of Thrones expecting something else here, I feel, and they're going to be turned off. But it's also going to bring in a different audience that maybe didn't like Game of Thrones. So I hope they can just find those people because it is a different kind of blend here. Still great nonetheless. And you see how awesome just seeing this snow leopard that is the demon of Lord Asriel in this flashback of him just bringing Lyra to the headmaster looks amazing, gets me super excited. And then we now jump to 12 years later, and now you see Lyra with Roger here in Jordan College, and this really nailed just this intro you see in the book here when you're first introduced to Lyra so well, that energy she has. And to compare her, she's a lot like an Arya Stark here. She's a rebel, she wants to be an explorer, adventurer, and she's full of energy and curiosity, and Dafne Keen brings that to the role perfectly. Just her presence about her is this character. Like, really, the casting here is just spectacular all around, which I'll get more into with other characters, but her specifically was perfect. It's like the character just floated out of the pages. And what this premiere did so well was it stuffed a lot of stuff in from the books in one episode, but it didn't feel cramped or overwhelming, and it didn't feel forced. It put enough in there to keep things moving along and kind of get you hooked and keep it exciting at the same time, though, giving you enough information to understand what's going on and getting you to know the characters. And I think it blended really well, which is so hard to pull off. I mean, just look how great they did with introducing you to Lyra and Roger and really setting up, like you saw again in Game of Thrones. I hate keeping compared to it, but it's going to have a lot of that. And it kind of is like when Arya gets excited seeing the Lannisters coming to North for the first time. It's like Lyra here seeing her uncle, Lord Asriel, coming Jordan College. So you get this like innocence of childhood just displayed on this episode, and it did such a good job of wrapping to some darkness and her innocence being lost as this episode goes on. And they did a really good job at setting up mystery here. So just seeing Lord Asriel in the Northern Lights here taking photos of this aurora, and you're just like, what is he doing? He's got this frozen head, and it gets you curious right off the bat. And what's so important about his Dark Materials books is it's just, again, another story just about you can't trust anybody. And Lord Asriel even says that to Lyra here in this episode. And it set that kind of scene up so well. And the way everyone's portraying their characters, you don't know who to trust, what the hell is going on, and who are these people, and what's everyone's intention. So I think that's ultimately going to get people hooked into this show. And look, this is the first episode of a big show like this. You're going to judge the opening. What is this opening about? Can it live up to a show like Game of Thrones opening? And I think it looks amazing. I think the opening even looks better than Game of Thrones. Now, with the music, I can't really judge it yet. I dig it right now, but, you know, theme music, you have to see a couple episodes. It has to sink in. Then you'll know if it's working. It's so hard to just say from one episode if, oh, it fits perfectly or it's catchy. You got to just see how it goes. So I'm going to pause on my opinions on that, but so far so good. And I love, again, going back to them not being cheap, seeing her demon Pan change forms consistently in this episode was great. That's part of the magic of this book, and they're making sure, the show is making sure to keep that. You can't be cheap with the type of story like this. And another point I have is that it seems like they learned from The Lion King here, because the remake of The Lion King, a lot of complaints people had, as did myself, was that the CGI of the animals was too realistic, especially in the faces, and that there was no emotion shown in those faces. It seems like so far they're doing a good job, especially with Pan's character, that they're giving his eyebrows more movement and more cartoony in a way, the way he's reacting to Lyra, which is good. You gotta display the emotion or it just becomes dull. And again, just another scene translated perfectly from the book. It's like exactly what I imagined reading it. Is just when Lyra is spying on Lord Asriel. He has this big presentation here. And what James McAvoy does really good with a character like Lord Asriel is he plays him as a very mysterious, complicated character, but, you know, you can't understand what he really thinks of Lyra and his relationship to her, and he plays the jerk part well and where his priorities are and obsessive about what he's researching, and where that falls into him is abandonment here of Lyra. And you see that set up just in the first scene when he drops her off at the school, and then you see it again, just little details like the snow leopard telling him, oh, don't forget about the girl. Like, he's in this room after this presentation and actually forgot about her in the room. Like, that's where his head is at. And then he abandons her later in the episode and says he doesn't have time for her. It's brutal. But McAvoy makes sure to show that side of him really well. So I remember, too, when he's having this presentation to Jordan College, a lot of this stuff with the dust, it's going to seem confusing at first and overwhelming. It's supposed to be. Give it some time. It's going to all make sense. It's supposed to be weird, and what the hell are they talking about? You just got to push through it. It'll become clearer. They're like dipping your feet into it, which is good. It's a good approach. But don't take it as you have to know everything right away at this moment. It will come together. If you can just get the idea in your head that, look, there's this Magisterium that basically is just hiding things from the normal people here that they don't want people to see, like this city in the sky he got a picture of. And why is dust even a thing, and it just affects adults and not kids? So those are things you just want to have in your head, but don't look too deep into it yet. And the reason, too, he had this frozen head was this explorer Grumman. He wants to continue his research about this stuff, and it's his proof that, hey, this is probably the Magisterium taking care of this guy because he was a threat. But it's proof that he was onto something. So we also get introduced now to this Gyptian society, and you meet Makasta, and you see her at basically what's a bar mitzvah for Egyptian here, and that's of her son Tony Costa, whose demon is settled as a hawk, and now he's transitioning from boy to man and letting that demon go. But what's important here is the little brother Billy Costa goes off on his own, and he gets gobbled up, aka kidnapped here by a gobbler. And it's cool, we see this wolf demon who was watching him, pretty sick. I think one of the coolest things about his Dark Materials, and you see in the show already, is sort of the evil demons in a way, and they didn't shy away from that, which I appreciated. So a really great scene was written here with end performance was the headmaster when he explains why he tried to poison Lord Asriel, and that he was basically just listening to what he had learned from the alethiometer. And we learned that the alethiometer is an instrument that tells you the truth. And he's learned from this instrument that Asriel's research isn't really the way to go and the answer. It's actually how important Lyra is in her journey, and that she's gonna have a great betrayal and her experience will be terrible. That pumps you up for what's to come. They delivered this line perfectly. It's basically the perfect thing to give you just an idea of where we're going and to get you excited and to really sell someone who's watching this for the first time and why they're going to devote their time to this show. It's a nice hook, as they would say. And just the biggest credit, again, I got to give this episode is, like I said before, how it's blending so much into it, but not feeling overstuffed. And even just squeezing in here, developing for Lyra her love for Roger and how important him being a best friend to her was an only friend. And they got that in there and it was still convincing. So props to them. And one of my favorite scenes here was when Lyra actually finds out that Lord Asriel is leaving for the north without her. Doesn't even say goodbye, which is just cruel. And this one of the most beautiful details here that you can even do in a fantasy show is having little Pan. If you see when Lyra's running out of the bedroom to run after Lord Asriel, she's running up the steps and little Pan falls behind as a mouse and has struggle getting up. And the next shot when she's running outside full speed, he's a hawk and they're both white. Really just great attention to detail and little things you just gotta catch to appreciate. But I love that. Same too when she was snooping around earlier in the episode. Just a little quick shot of Pan becoming a moth for a second. So I like that they're even having little sneaky changes there. And it's brutal here with McAvoy telling her, look, I don't have time for you right now. He's leaving her behind. She just wants to go with him. And she asks him, did my parents die in an airship like this? So we learned that her parents died here and that she's an orphan. And I love little Roger here getting his line in where he's like, she's better than you think she is. She's special. Love that. So then we cut now to a scene where basically Game of Thrones walks in here, where we got the character of Jon Fa played by the pirate from Game of Thrones. And then we got Coram played by Mormont's father from Game of Thrones. So you're getting those familiar faces just thrown at you. But this introduction was the only character introduction I wasn't crazy about. In the books, it's a lot more grand here with Jon Fa and what he's about, and this seemed weird, and I feel like the representation of Jon Fa and Coram here was just not at all how I imagined the book. So I'm still going to give it a chance to see where they're going with it, but it just felt off. They didn't really get to me that awesome introduction that every other character did. But they informed Tony Costa here that no, there really is gobblers and there's kids disappearing all over the Egyptian communities. But this scene still was weak. It didn't have the weight it should have had in this moment. And that would be probably my biggest complaint this episode was so far the Jon Fa Coram scenes are a little lackadaisical. However, what was really cool was seeing you got like these villains here in the Magisterium with the father, and they're talking about telling the cardinal about what Asriel's doing and that Jordan College gave him money. So they're on to everything here. And that Magisterium building looks beautiful. Such a cool production design all around in this episode. And then it brilliantly cuts to one of the best intros of the episode with Miss Coulter here. And this is another character like Lyra to me, just brought right out of the pages. Exactly how I imagine her. Ruth Wilson was the spotlight for me in this episode. She absolutely destroyed this character so well. Like A++. This is Miss Coulter. And the monkey demon looks great too. I was worried about that, but they pull it off. And you see now she offers Lyra a position as her assistant, and Lyra just admires her because she's an explorer too. She's been to the north where she dreams of going. She's met bears. And they get right to that too, which was great. Like they move the relationship along. You start just seeing, like in the books, it's that pace. The books are fast-paced books. These aren't slow books, so the show is keeping true to that, which I also think is great. But look, Lyra's loyal. She wants to bring Roger. That's her only friend. That's what's the one thing she would miss from Jordan College the most. But you see, they kind of show you well here that Miss Coulter's a little suspicious. Like, why was she at first just like, I don't really want to bring him? And then when Lyra sees he's missing, she's very dismissive of it. And then she's like, oh, yeah, we're going to do our best when we get to London. But then when they even go on the plane together, Miss Coulter's just like, oh, let's not talk about Roger right now. Let's just focus on other things. So it's very suspicious. There was a weird throw-in here, though, like literally a 2-second scene with Macosta and Tony Costa just on this boat, and he cries on her shoulder, and she goes, oh my Billy. Why was that thrown in, by the way? That was, if you rewatch it, that was like 3 seconds just to show that she was upset about little Billy missing again. I don't understand. That was weird. That's a editing error to me. Like, cut that out. Again, if you haven't watched my reviews before, I nitpick a lot. So it comes with the territory here. But what's great is the headmaster has this huge moment from the books. He informs Lyra about the alethiometer and says, look, her and Pen are just going to have to learn themselves how to use it, but you can't tell anyone about it, not even Miss Coulter. So really cool. She has this instrument. You're just seeing how she's going to use it. She even attempts to use it in this episode. Doesn't work, but she gets on that plane just in time to get with Miss Coulter because you got to realize, really went because she then thinks Miss Coulter's her best chance to save Roger. So it's good because it shows you that Lyra's true intentions, number one, is Roger over even this journey she can go on now. Complete opposite of how her uncle is, where he picks the journey over his own niece. A nice little thing you can catch here too is that monkey sitting next to Miss Coulter on that plane paid very close attention to Lyra's pocket there and that alethiometer. So it was nice they threw that in there. So gotta make sure to catch those little things. And this is just a beautiful last shot here of Lyra seeing the Gyptians are leaving as well to go to London. And a nice, like, again, capturing that magic of a book like this. It's just really great how they had Pan look up at Lyra and they smiled at each other. It felt so real, even though, again, this is just a CGI creature, but it was awesome. And it's just setting up now, this feels like a movie, which is great. You want HBO productions like this to feel like each episode is a movie in its own right. And it's great because you have such this like magical moment with her and Pan, but it cuts to that darkness again now with poor Roger gobbled up in this cage. And it cuts perfectly to the most pumped up part of the credits music to get you really excited for the next episode. So awesome job. That's how you do an open. I'm giving this one a 9.5. Really well done. It's so hard to pull off premieres, especially of a new show, but this is one of the best premieres I can think of in a long time. It kept the pace of the books, which is quick pace. It gave you a lot of character development, a lot of information, but I think it did it in an obtainable way. Again, this is a show that I suggest watch it twice. If you haven't read the books, I think this is actually a show, I usually prefer not to read the books before a show so I can kind of be surprised, but I think this is when you should read the books first because the books are so good. I think the show is just going to elevate it. But either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. What did you think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And again, please do not mention any book spoilers down below. That is not for here. Please leave that somewhere else so just TV viewers won't get spoiled. And please make sure to subscribe. I'll be covering every episode of His Dark Materials. I also review Watchmen at the moment, so you don't want to miss that. And I also do movie reviews and celebrity interviews with the stars themselves. And please follow me at Steve Varley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.